I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy.
You can find previous podcasts and more information on a range of health topics at peoplespharmacy.com. Americans have been fighting about food for decades. What's healthier, low-fat or low-carb eating patterns? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
We've talked with many experts about the value of a Mediterranean diet, rich in produce and low in red meat. Today, we're going to find out about the carnivore diet.
What's the difference between a carnivore diet and a ketogenic diet?
Our guest is Dr. Eric Westman of Duke University. He started as a skeptic of the Atkins diet. Then he conducted research that turned him into an advocate.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, the food fight over fat. Learning about keto and carnivore diets.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, COVID cases are increasing, especially on the West Coast. Oregon has seen a late summer surge in cases. California has also seen an alarming increase. Hospitalizations for COVID patients have almost doubled in recent weeks. An objective measure of viral spread comes from wastewater samples. The CDC's wastewater surveillance system reports very high genomic sequencing levels for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. There is hope, however, that the summer surge will ease soon, though public health officials worry another COVID wave could start as early as November, just in time for holiday travel.
People who are trying to avoid COVID-19 might want to consider an inexpensive, low-risk strategy to stay safer. A study published last week in JAMA Internal Medicine tested the nasal spray azelastine for prevention of SARS-CoV-2 infections. This over-the-counter antihistamine is sold under the brand names Estelin and Astepro. Beyond its anti-allergenic and anti-inflammatory properties, this medication has antiviral activity against several respiratory viruses from SARS-CoV-2 to RSV and flu. A double-blind, placebo-controlled trial in Germany included 450 patients who spritzed either azelastine or placebo into their noses 3 times daily for roughly 2 months. During that time, 5 people spritzing the antihistamine came down with COVID. In the group using the placebo spray, there were 15 positive cases. The authors concluded that their results support the potential of azelastine as a safe prophylactic approach, warranting confirmation in larger, multicentric trials.
A different study tested the effects of inhaled nitric oxide against COVID-19. The investigators note that this gas is produced naturally in the body and is well known as a vasodilator. It also has antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties. In a recent study, 55 patients hospitalized with COVID-associated pneumonia got inhaled nitric oxide or usual care. Those who had up to 6 hours exposure to high-dose nitric oxide were released from the hospital more quickly and needed less supplemental oxygen. According to the investigators, the inhaled nitric oxide treatment was safe and well tolerated. They suggest this approach might be helpful against other pulmonary infections.
Generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, is one of the most common psychiatric conditions in the U.S. Doctors may prescribe anti-anxiety drugs such as alprazolam or diazepam, but these benzodiazepines may not be suitable for long-term use. SSRI antidepressants are also prescribed, but they too don't work for everyone with anxiety problems. Now, scientists report a single dose of the hallucinogen LSD can have lasting effects. Nearly 200 patients were recruited for the study. The researchers randomly assigned them to take placebo or one of 4 different doses of the active compound. The 2 lowest doses of LSD did not have an effect that was significantly greater than placebo. People getting the 2 highest doses, 100 or 200 micrograms, were significantly less anxious 1 month later. Adverse effects included hallucinations, nausea, and headache during the treatment. This helps establish the groundwork for further research on the potential benefits of one dose of LSD to treat disabling anxiety under careful medical supervision.
Are you a coffee lover? How do you drink your brew? Previous studies have shown that regular coffee drinkers get substantial health benefits. They tend to have a lower risk of liver cancer, diabetes, dementia, and cardiovascular disease. Few studies get into the details of coffee consumption, though. Now, a cohort study of more than 42,000 American adults participating in the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey demonstrated that higher coffee consumption was associated with a lower likelihood of dying between 1999 and 2018. People drinking 1 to 3 cups daily got the most benefit, but they needed to drink their coffee black. Adding sugar or cream or non-dairy creamer blunted the effects, and that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. You've heard a lot about the health benefits of the Mediterranean diet here on the People's Pharmacy. We've also talked to guests like Dr. Will Bulsiewicz about the value of fiber in our diet.
Today we'll be considering a different dietary approach. Is there any science to support the keto or carnivore diet? Joining us for this interview is Bianca Garcia. She holds a master's degree in media, medicine, and health from Harvard Medical School, where she created an audio documentary on the carnivore diet. She served as the AAAS Mass Media Fellow at WUNC. We invited Bianca to co-host this interview.
To help us better understand the carnivore diet, we turn to Dr. Eric Westman, Associate Professor of Medicine at Duke University. He founded the Duke Keto Medicine Clinic in 2006 after conducting clinical research regarding low-carbohydrate ketogenic diets. He's written a number of popular books such as End Your Carb Confusion and Keto Clarity. His newest course, Carnivore Made Simple, is open for enrollment.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Eric Westman.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And we
again.
Yes, again, for the I don't know how manyth time.
I lost count.
Okay, me too. And we are really pleased to have with us in the studio, helping us with the interview, Bianca Garcia, who is a journalist and, I might say, a medical anthropologist. We're glad to have you here, Bianca.
It's my pleasure.
Dr. Westman, I have to tell you, when it comes to food, I get so confused. It seems like the dietary guidelines have changed so much in my lifetime. How do you keep up, and tell us what you think about this whole process, because you've been studying food for decades.
Well, so you have to think about the human body first, not this is my perspective. I'm an internal medicine specialist. So I got trained in an era where we were dealing with, diabetes a little bit, high blood pressure a little bit, no obesity. I mean, in the 80s in training, there was really nothing there.
Obesity existed.
Yeah, but not like today, right? So, my colleagues started giving pills and shots for everything. And I started to work here in Durham at the Durham Veterans Affairs Hospital, and started to learn about research and worked with the inventor of the nicotine patch for 10 years, Jed Still in Durham. So, but I got to learn about science and how to apply the scientific method to humans, to clinical research. And so randomized trials were paramount. And really, you might even say ignore everything until there's a randomized trial. Well, that works for a while. After 10 years, I realized I was not fixing anything. And after 10 years of my patients at the VA, I loved them dearly, and they were all kind of getting worse. So 2 patients show up in my office right about the same time, having fixed their diabetes and obesity, and I asked them what they did. They said, all I did is eat steak and eggs. I'm like, what the heck? This is 1998, okay? And so I'm thinking to myself, well, lightning strikes. And yet then another patient comes in. All I did is do the Atkins diet. I said, what's that? And he said, well, this book, it probably came out before you were born. And wait a minute. Now you're getting personal. So I go to the bookstore and sure, there's the Atkins diet. There's the Ornish diet. There back then there was even the Zone hadn't come out yet. So there weren't a whole lot of books on the shelf, but there was a doctor who had a clinic you could visit, and that was Dr. Atkins. So I wrote him a letter. He calls back and invites me to his office with a couple of young researchers who were doing a different job at the time. And so I saw a clinic in action after seeing two people do the total opposite of everything that I was taught. And even then, one of the patients who I was treating at the VA said, what are you worried about? And I said, well, your cholesterol will go up. Remember, this is 1998 for me. And he looked at me and said, well, why don't you check it? And the lab was down the hall at the VA and didn't cost anything for me or him to do it. So in 2 cases, people lost weight. These were men, lost over 50 pounds, and their cholesterol levels got better, regardless of how you look at it. Total and LDL, triglyceride, and HDL. Like, what the heck's going on? So I had to learn basically for myself as an internist, as a clinical researcher, about nutrition. And when I went to the dietary meetings, the nutrition meeting, it was like, everything's low fat, everything's now plant-based. And I'm like, well, but what about the patient sitting in front of me who's fixed conditions that doctors can't fix by doing the exact opposite of what they were taught? And I met Michelle Hearn, who wrote the book, The Dietitian's Dilemma. What if you have to do the exact opposite of what you were taught to fix yourself? And that's Michelle. She is a dietitian, and I'm on a board of a new society with her, so I've gotten to know her pretty well. So I guess, looking back, what you eat matters. If I could be dean of all the schools of medicine and even DO schools, I'd say, nutrition should be key to your education of what a human body needs attention to. And in my last 25 years, we've documented over and over again, and other people documented, there's no nutrition training for doctors, or they get taught the wrong thing. So here I am today, asked to talk about low carb and keto and LCHF, and I gave a talk in London recently, and it was The Fad That Never Fades. The Fad That Never Fades was the title of my talk. And so the concepts of what we're talking about has been here, for hundreds of thousands of years. The name has changed.
Okay. Bianca, how did you get interested in the carnivore diet? Because you've been following up on this for at least a year now.
That's right. I was pursuing my master's of science, and I was thinking about media and health together. And I was, as a social media user, starting to see a lot of social media content on the carnivore diet. Someone who's looked at nutrition, who's been interested in nutrition, I thought it was really, really strange that people were eating, as Dr. Westman said, just steak and eggs. So I wanted to look into kind of the anthropology of this. What is making people eat the way that they are eating? And how do we think about this personal sort of decision as it weighs up against the weight of the medical institution and that kind of knowledge? And so I have a yet unpublished audio documentary on the carnivore diet called Against the Grain. And in doing that research, I've seen Dr. Westman's content. I've seen the content of many other creators. I've spoken to carnivores and learned about their personal experiences. And I've spoken to doctors who are also equally skeptical of the diet. So there is a wide range of opinions out there that I have been interested in following up on as a journalist.
Dr. Westman, I can imagine that you get some reactions, probably not so much from your patients, because your patients are coming to you saying, this is what I want to do, right?
Well, not necessarily. Although that's a good expectation that no, in fact, this week, that's why I'm in clinic at Duke 4 days a week in a private practice insurance pay system. No, actually, some people have no idea who I am. And there was just recently someone who goes to the Lincoln Community Health Center was referred to me, and I had to kind of figure out how do I help this person from Mexico navigate the food. And when I say you can have all the chicharron you want, the eyes light up. You can have all the pork rinds you want. That's also a telltale sign for someone from North Carolina, typically. But
thank you for translating chicharron.
Chicharrones, or I've had the best chicharron in Colombia. It was really pork belly. But anyway, it has no carbs, and it's kind of a secret trick if you're trying to.
It's very high fat.
It's very high fat, which is great on a carnivore or keto diet. It may not be great on a low fat diet. I understand. And I think there are a lot of ways to be healthy, just to kind of declare I'm not just a carnivore keto proponent. In fact, it was recently when Lucia Aronica at Stanford asked Christopher Gardner to do a sub-study of his paper called the Diet Fits study. The sub-study was, let's look at people who did ultra low fat and let's look at people who did ultra low carb. And so it selected out people who were actually following those and looked at health parameters. And actually the ultra low carb diet looked very similar to the ultra low fat diet.
In terms of outcomes?
In terms of improving insulin resistance.
Aha.
Improving what we understand now is probably the root cause of atherosclerosis.
Well, we just have a minute before the break, but I would love to have you explain insulin resistance because we are hearing about it so frequently now and it's so critical, but I fear that a lot of people don't yet understand it. So you have 1 minute to give us the insulin resistance overview.
Yeah, so insulin resistance actually as a term, I don't like it. You really should say high insulin levels. Because insulin resistance gives the connotation that there's something wrong in the person, something wrong in the cell, and you just need a drug. But what insulin resistance functionally is that insulin is not working to lower the blood glucose like it used to. So what you see is an elevated blood glucose compared to before, or A1C, the hemoglobin A1C, the 3-month average of the glucose. But you see the insulin resistance also means your insulin level is high. So I would rather have you talk about high insulin levels and how to get those down than insulin resistance, which is this term out there you need a drug for.
You're listening to Dr. Eric Westman, Associate Professor of Medicine at Duke University. He's a board member of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and the American Diabetes Society. Dr. Westman is a specialist in internal and obesity medicine.
After the break, we'll consider why dietary guidelines haven't made a difference.
There's not impeccable evidence to support the current guidelines, but that's also true for the carnivore diet.
What does science tell us about how it works?
How do carnivore and keto diets differ?
What are the pros and cons for patients following a carnivore diet?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. This podcast is brought to you in part by Sonu.
Ready to breathe like never before? Meet Sonu, S-O-N-U, the world's first FDA-approved wearable headband that gives you drug-free relief from nasal congestion in minutes. It's safe for adults and kids 12 and up, making it perfect for families dealing with allergies, sinus issues, or chronic stuffiness.
Sonu uses personalized sound-based therapy to naturally open nasal passages. No meds, no steroids, no sprays. Even better, up to 4 users can share one account, so the whole household can benefit. Compatible with both Apple and Android smartphones.
Learn more at getsonu.com. That's G-E-T, get, S-O-N-U, sonu.com. Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. On the People's Pharmacy, you hear a lot about the value of vegetables. We've interviewed nutrition experts like Dr. Walter Willett and Dr. Christopher Gardner, who are enthusiastic about a plant-based dietary pattern. Today, we're considering a different approach to eating. What are the benefits of a carnivore diet?
What's the difference between a ketogenic diet and a carnivore diet? What are the benefits and risks of such eating patterns?
Our guest is Dr. Eric Westman, Associate Professor of Medicine at Duke University. He founded the Duke Keto Medicine Clinic in 2006 after conducting clinical research regarding low-carbohydrate ketogenic diets. He's a board member of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and the American Diabetes Society. His areas of expertise include obesity and metabolic disorders.
We're also joined by Bianca Garcia. We invited her to co-host this interview while she served as WUNC's AAAS Mass Media Fellow. She holds a master's degree in media medicine and health from Harvard Medical School, where she created an audio documentary on the carnivore diet.
Dr. Westman, we've kind of reviewed a little bit of history of dietary guidelines and advice. Do we have any idea why so many of these dietary guidelines don't seem to have done the job?
Well, the way I look at it is there was never any science behind these dietary guidelines. That's pretty clear. And people have written papers on, there have been a paper as a thought piece of, was there any evidence when the dietary guidelines were made that there were, we should have those guidelines? And basically, no, there wasn't any evidence. So I think it was the government being lobbied to make the foods that America makes be consumed more by Americans. Thus, we don't have coconut oil in the guideline because we really are not big producers of coconut oil.
True enough.
But when I was...
But before we go any further, when we say the guidelines, what are we even talking about?
Well, I know, and, fortunately, the guidelines are pretty much uninterpretable right now to the average consumer, except institutions are still somewhat beholden to them. I was just on a panel recently at a meeting where we all kind of agreed no guideline is better than a bad guideline. And I am past president of the Obesity Medicine Association. We lobbied the government at the time, and I sat in the office of the woman who created the food pyramid, Susan Davis. And we said, people aren't healthy. She said, well, this is a guideline for healthy Americans. And we said, no, people aren't healthy. I'm, advocating for obesity treatment. So I think the first question is, are we giving guidelines to healthy people? Or like the studies say, and you just look around at the mall, or should we give guidelines and guidance to people who need a corrective therapeutic diet generally? So I'm not a big guideline guy, and I work with the patient in front of me and get results. And I think the guidelines have been a bad idea, even the latest ones.
And Dr. Westman, as you're pointing out, there's not a lot of evidence for the current guidelines, but from what I've seen, there's not a lot of published evidence about the carnivore diet either. But we can intuit from the keto diet and other similar low-carbohydrate diets why it might work. So can you walk us through a little bit about the science of why the carnivore diet works?
Absolutely. And I share your kind of assessment that there's not a whole lot of published literature. If you search carnivore, you'll get a survey. There's a survey from the Harvard group, Belinda Lennertz and David Ludwig, where they surveyed self-described carnivores and what happened to their health and all that. We actually surveyed a group who's of type 1 diabetics, as people affected by type 1 diabetes as well. It was a Facebook survey, and it was the most cited publication in the journal Pediatrics at the time. So I don't discount this information, but you have to keep it in, it's preliminary information. The grassroots change that we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years is that people are changing their own diet with influencers or just word of mouth. and getting amazing changes, including keto, including carnivore. And I think the mechanism is that they both really fix insulin resistance, meaning they lower the insulin levels, and really any effective diet can do that.
Dr. Westman, we've been talking about the carnivore diet as if we all know what it is, but I don't. So maybe you can tell us, what are people eating? What is the carnivore diet?
And before that, even, what is the keto diet? So how do they differ and what are they?
Yeah, so I think there are many different versions of these things. Carnivore, I think, can be best described as just animal-based foods. So kind of like you're used to saying plant-based, 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 plant. Oh, that's kind of, I don't
Or
like
plant-forward, yeah.
It changed. Oh, that's one way to do things. But, people who come to me, yes, some do self-select. They want to follow not everyone comes not knowing what I do. I would say 2/3 of the people come seek me out because of the teaching that I give. I have to admit that. But so 2 years ago, there was a textbook called Ketogenic, The Science of Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction. And I use this as show and tell to people from the first visit to my office to just show that there is a body of knowledge now out there on the keto diet. And keto really
Let
means...
me read the subtitle of the book you're holding up. It's Ketogenic, The Science of Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction in Human Health.
That's it.
Tell us about it.
Well, Dr. Will Yancey and I at Duke have been doing research since 2002, and we contributed chapters on obesity and type 2 diabetes reversal in this textbook. But it's much more detailed. In fact, I haven't read every word in it yet because, there's a lot of information on the keto diet. Well, keto really means that you're using ketones in your body to an extent that you didn't before. Is there a certain level? No, not really. And is there a maximal or greater keto diet? I don't think we know that yet. So to me, a keto diet is a very low carbohydrate diet that allows your body to access the fat stores in a flexible manner so that you can be burning your body fat. And as a result, your ketone level goes up compared to those who eat carbs. The idea of fat loss, weight loss has been implanted, and that's how I learned it. The keto diet was a weight loss diet, but it does much more than that. And now I have people coming to me whom I've taught a keto diet for years, and there are a few conditions that still remain. And I haven't been able to, I can fix almost every internal medicine problem that my colleagues use drugs for. I can reverse type 2 diabetes, obesity, PCOS, heartburn, migraines, all these things. But there's a nagging component of problems that have to do with inflammation and autoimmunity that keto doesn't quite fix. And I have to say that the keto, the way I teach it, it's unlimited meat, poultry, fish, and shellfish and eggs till you're comfortably full, and 1 cup of non-starchy vegetables and 2 cups of leafy greens. Now, I don't enforce those vegetables, and so what I teach is not strictly a carnivore diet. It allows for these vegetables and leafy greens, but people are coming to me now over the last few years fixing these autoimmunity conditions by dropping those vegetables. And so I'm just wondering, so what I teach is carnivore-ish, and I passively allow people eat a carnivore diet under my care. I monitor things. And the science, I want to go in the direction, there are case studies of people who fix their inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and we have a case study brewing, trying to get it published of palindromic arthritis that was basically fixed by just changing the food. So keto means ketosis. Keto means fat metabolism. Carnivore, to me, is a subset of a low-carb keto diet so that it doesn't seem as far afield to me as it might to someone else.
Still, this is a pretty socially and scientifically divisive idea. So I wonder how your peers and your colleagues look at this kind of keto, carnivore-ish diet, especially without the immense evidence base that like a plant-forward diet might have.
Well,
What kinds of reactions do you get from your colleagues?
so actually, there will never be a unanimity in diet. Let that be just my first statement. And that's one reason why I've kept keto out of the press. In fact, whenever I'd get onto the press or something, they would try to find someone against it. Well, you can always find someone against it. You can always find a plant-based is best. No, there's no evidence that a plant-based diet is better than a carnivore animal-based diet. It's all implanted in people's minds. So, no, because the Stanford study where they finally looked at insulin resistance between these two different very extreme diets, they both worked. And, I remember, gosh, how long has it been, Joe and Terry? We were talking, the Duke rice diet started all this at the Duke campus in the 1930s, or, the history of it.
Before our time even.
Yeah, well, and then, the rice diet no longer exists, although there's still people who remember that. That would be like an Ornish, Pritikin, ultra low fat kind of diet. And I think it works, but it doesn't mean there's no other way to do it. So I guess coming around, Bianca, that there never will be agreement among the experts. And so what I've learned is I put my head down, created a clinic, and over the last 15 years, I learned as much as I could about using a keto and carnivore diet in a clinical setting. And if other people say, well, it doesn't work, that's not true. The long-term effects remain unknown, but that's true for any diet. So that, we get into this, there's no evidence. Well, there's really precious little evidence, even for the Mediterranean diet, which everyone believes is the best. So, and evidence meaning randomized trials, long-term. So we're left with what is biologically sensible and also therapeutic. I just want to loop back to this textbook. I think there's general consensus that a keto diet can be a therapeutic tool. I mean, so even my naysaying colleagues who don't like the idea of carnivore and keto will say, okay, well, you can reverse things and fix things, but then what? You got to get off that eventually. And I'm like, well, but if it reversed all their problems, why would you want to get them off it, And because they just know that it's bad. I mean, if it's not known, it must be bad, which I learned, you and I sat in a room like this when that first Atkins paper came out and, the controversy. And now nobody really knows that name other than the food on the shelf.
So, Dr. Westman, would you please tell us briefly what you have seen as the clinical benefits for people who are following this carnivore or even carnivore-ish diet? And then we'd also like to talk about some potential downsides.
Absolutely. So from my bench or clinic, what I see for those who follow carnivore or keto kind of diet with instruction from someone who knows what they're doing, that now, internet and carnivore internet and keto internet, there are so many different places to learn. It's very confusing. But so you want to learn from someone who knows what they're doing. And if you're on multiple medications, you want to be sure to be working with someone who knows how to get you off those medicines safely. And so what I see is the average patient coming to me is 60, 65 years old on 7 to 10 medications for diabetes, high blood pressure, heartburn, arthritis. Many of these people have already had hip and joint replacements, and now they have obesity too. And so I simply tell people that we store fat on our bodies for energy, and we want to get access to that fat store. And I could use a keto, low glycemic, a carnivore type of diet based on someone's preference. And over time, I can reverse all of those medical conditions by changing the food. It's so unbelievable you won't believe me. So for the last 10 years, at medical conferences, I've said, come to my office. And partly I set up this clinic so that it could be a teaching clinic, not only for the patients, but for doctors. So residents and students at Duke come through my office. Other doctors have come, even from around the world, to see it in action. And so basically, just about all of the internal medicine problems that are treated with medications today can be reversed or greatly reversed just by changing the food.
I want to ask you a little bit about a couple of conditions that are widespread in our society and we don't have good treatments for. Inflammation, which I'd love to have you define what that means from a biological perspective, and also the impact on the brain, on mental clarity, because there are a lot of people in the age bracket that you're talking about who are complaining about mental fogginess and, just functionality. I can't remember those names anymore the way I used to. And they were also complaining about their knees and their elbows and their fingers. What impact does this approach have on those two areas?
Yeah, so inflammation is basically your body's ability to clot, to fight infection, to function, and you need some inflammation. So you don't. Someone came to a meeting, an expert, and said, "Well, I don't eat that because it causes inflammation. I don't eat that because it causes inflammation." The first question at the microphone was, "Well, what do you eat?" Basically, he said, "I fast because eating causes inflammation." And I mean, that's to the absurd degree.
Not a good long-term strategy.
Not a long-term strategy. Yeah. So you want some inflammation, but you don't want too much. I guess it's like Goldilocks. You want a little bit of inflammation, but not too much. And I think the elephant in the room is that food causes inflammation. Of course, stress causes inflammation, and so food, the carbs are and refined sugar and flour are really kind of the ones that are causing most of the inflammation today. The brain function is fascinating, and I think the common consensus is that insulin resistance, remember that term? High insulin levels over a period of time actually cause Alzheimer's. The cause. But the problem is once you get a memory issue from Alzheimer's, it's too late. So it's like the plane's going down. So everything I've learned about Alzheimer's is that you want to take action now. Like if you have a family history of it, a loved one with it, you want to address that insulin resistance. And there are numerous dietary ways to do that.
You're listening to Dr. Eric Westman, Associate Professor of Medicine at Duke University. He founded the Duke Keto Medicine Clinic in 2006 after conducting clinical research regarding low-carbohydrate ketogenic diets. His newest course, Carnivore Made Simple, is open now for enrollment by People's Pharmacy listeners for a limited time. Bianca Garcia, a AAAS Mass Media Fellow at WUNC, joined us in co-hosting this interview.
After the break, we'll find out what people are saying on the internet about the carnivore diet.
How long does it take for people to see weight loss from a carnivore diet?
What downsides might we expect from such a diet or the keto diet?
Bianca will share her experience trying a carnivore diet. How did that go?
Should we change our thinking on nutritional science?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon.
What's a healthy way to eat? Humans around the world have come up with different answers to this question. Most nutrition scientists agree that the standard American diet falls far short.
Our guest today is Dr. Eric Westman. He is Associate Professor of Medicine at Duke University, where he founded the Duke Keto Medicine Clinic almost 20 years ago. Dr. Westman is a co-founder of Adapt Your Life Academy, where his newest course is Carnivore Made Simple. It's open for enrollment by People's Pharmacy listeners for a short time. Bianca Garcia, a AAAS Mass Media Fellow at WUNC, joined us in co-hosting this interview.
Dr. Westman, you were talking about the internet culture of this diet. And you were saying how, it's important to get instruction from people who know what they're doing and how to get you off your meds in order for you to, safely carry out this diet. But I think I want to talk a little bit about the internet culture and, how this diet is spreading popularly. What are you seeing out there? What do we have to be aware of as people might be encountering this diet in the wild?
Yeah, great. And, I'm just kind of in awe of the internet compared to 20 years ago. And it's a wonderful thing and a terrible thing all at the same time. So the big line of demarcation should be if you see a doctor for a problem that you're taking a medicine for, be sure to do this with a doctor who knows what they're doing, because medicines can become too strong on the first day. I've had people have low blood sugars from insulin and other diabetes medicines on the first day. So if you're consuming this information online and it's to the general healthy person, I'm not so worried about it. But once you get into that clinical population, now, I don't know any of my patients who are on TikTok. So that might automatically select because the people who come to me are generally older, but that's not always the case. So I'm getting patients who come to me because I kind of passively endorse a carnivore diet as a subset of a keto diet. That I think you want to do things that and not only feel right isn't the right word. It's the thing. It's changes that make you feel good. I mean, that may correct a problem that you have. And even if it's excessive hunger and all you can do is think about food, then this is something that food is really the answer. And I'm afraid doctors don't have that information. And, it really is hard to police this, isn't it? But to me, I try to make sure that if you're, older, you're on medicines, that you have someone who knows what they're doing help you.
I also want to add, though, from my field work and from the interviews that I do, that young people are exploring this diet. I think there's a lot to say about the simplicity of it. People are attracted to it because, unlike the Mediterranean diet, which has very strict ideas of what you can and can't eat, this is just take out everything and stick with just meat. And that's pretty intuitive and simple. But at the same time, that can have some, let's say, bodily impacts. I tried the carnivore diet for a little bit. I couldn't stick with it. So what can we expect about people who just get on the diet? And I guess the essence of this question is how long does it take for this thing to work?
Well, it depends what you're doing it for. So I have no problem compared to all the other things you can do in terms of nutrition. I think, can we agree that the standard American diet just isn't highest on the list?
I think we can all
Yep.
agree with that.
So what's then next? Can everyone do a super strict eat local, go to the farmer's market, never go to McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's?
Not everyone.
Not everyone. So we have to have some sort of compromise, I believe. And that's also my doctor perspective. I don't just preach as an influencer, do this, and you have to be perfect. There are those who do that. They preach that, and I see people coming in worried about the carblets, the little micro carbs, and the maltodextrin, and the cheese, come on. That's not metabolically substantially anything you should worry about. So how you get it taught matters a lot. And the carnivore diet, as it's taught today, just eat meat. Well, I think it's relatively healthy. And if I could go back, Joe and Terry, 25 years ago, I would have said, show me a study that Atkins' diet is bad. There never was one. And it took me just 2 years ago, and with Jeff Volek, a researcher who's been with me in this space for 25 years, for him to be on a podium and say, there's never been a study that showed that a nutritional ketosis, the Atkins diet, induction even, which now, is carnivore, there's never been a study to show that it's bad. When I thought about that and looked back, we had the wrong emotional, reactive position of we had to try to prove that it was good when nobody had shown that it was bad. It was prejudging. And I have that same feeling here. Like, yes, it's a feeling, and I want science. I want more science. That's what's going on today. Hey, it's just eating meat, which is a lot better than eating all that other garbage. And in a scientific venue, I do say things like, prove that a keto diet is bad, using the method that I use, because we don't see that it's bad. And if you just say a keto-ish diet from nutritional epidemiology shows that it's bad, that doesn't count. But so anyway, I you know me, I was taught to protect my data and protect what I saw in front of me. But then I cheated. I went to doctors' offices who they'd done it for 30 years before me.
Well, Dr. Westman, here at the People's Pharmacy, we rarely hear about a medical intervention that is just all good and has no downside ever for anyone. So, can you tell us about some downsides that people might want to be aware of that could happen while you're following a carnivore diet?
Or a keto diet. So,
yeah, that's true.
Because what we have learned over the years, and it took us about 40 or 50 years to recognize that some people will say, oh, this drug is marvelous. I love gabapentin. It takes away my nerve pain. And other people say, gabapentin ruined my life.
Made me crazy.
I had hallucinations. My brain stopped working. So nothing is ever really black or white. And some people, I am sure, as we've interviewed in the past, I love fiber fueled diet. It's the best diet. And then other people say, oh my gosh, I just had so much gas I couldn't tolerate it. So give us the pros and the cons. You've already given mostly the pluses, but are there some people who have problems with a keto or carnivore-ish diet?
Well, that's a great point, and that raises the issue and the reason why formal research is necessary is that I learned a long time ago that if someone is just selecting out to come see me because they have good results, then I have a selection bias. What happened to people who couldn't follow it? Mm-hmm. What happened to someone who had a problem and they didn't come? So it's important to have a study, I don't think we need studies to show efficacy. I mean, I could show efficacy with 50 people compared to a standard American diet for diabetes. Our study of low glycemic versus low carb diets published in 2008 only had 50 people in it. So we can show efficacy, and it's the safety side that you need more people involved, and you get 100 people, you get thousands of people. Then, with a drug, then you get millions of people. Then you start to really get an idea of the side effects. But so I think the side effects that most people have with keto or carnivore are manageable. We teach how to have keto adaptation at first, where you add salt back in if you don't have a salt-sensitive condition. If someone has headache or cravings, that goes away typically in a few days or a week. There might be change in bowel function where you treat that with a little magnesium early on or some other electrolyte supplement. Being able to stay on the diet, to me, is not only the biologic change that occurs, it's also how that person perceives other people, think of them, and if they don't want to go to the store and just have meat in their grocery cart. I mean, that's a difference. So metabolically, I have yet to see someone who cannot do a keto or carnivore diet metabolically, because all of those problems are kind of screened out in pediatrics. So if you have a serious fatty acid disorder, you can't burn fat, you don't really get out of childhood. So as an internist, as an adult, I'm comfortable having people do a keto or carnivore diet. And most of the side effects, if this were a drug, we'd say, well, these are mild and manageable.
I'll tell you a little bit about my perspective because, like I mentioned, I tried and I failed the carnivore diet. And before I get into that experience, I think I'll frame it by saying, I'm a generally pretty healthy person. I was trying this as a social experiment. there was nothing really keeping me going when I hit these roadblocks. And so for a lot of people who approach the carnivore diet, they're doing it because they need something out of their health experience that they're looking for in the carnivore diet. That wasn't my case. So when I got the keto flu, as it's popularly known, I was nauseous. I had headaches. I couldn't get up in the morning. I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't for me. But also, I felt the immense social pressure of the diet. I couldn't go out and eat with my friends the way I wanted to. I am a foodie, and I felt a little depressed about not getting to eat the colors on my plate. And also, meat is kind of expensive. So, I was feeling that in my wallet. These are all social things about the carnivore diet that are pitfalls of it. And I think that we need to talk about these because nutrition is inherently social. So while there is evidence for these like immense changes to embodied health, there's also the social health that's important to think about. But I do want to follow up with a question for Dr. Westman, which is about the common skepticism for this diet, which is like, what do we do with this information that we've all heard that red meat is carcinogenic and that if we don't eat vegetables, we're going to get like a vitamin C deficiency? How do I think about that?
Well, that's a lot to unpack. Thanks for sharing your story. I wonder if you added salt during the keto adaptation phase.
I learned afterwards that I should have been doing that.
I'm sorry you didn't learn from someone who knew what they were teaching.
And I was going off the internet, I think that's the other thing. Which is
ignore every internet thing except mine. Isn't that funny? So, but the social things are real. But I think back in the 1970s, people started jogging, and it wasn't socially acceptable. In fact, people started to get treadmills and jog. I mean, I've traveled to Europe and I was jogging, and the Europeans looked at me like I was a nutcase because you just didn't jog in Europe. I didn't see a whole lot of Europeans jogging even today. But so social acceptance can change over time. And I think that trade-off for you wasn't right. You weren't getting some benefit that you were, fixing your incessant hunger. So I'm watching some influencers, and I do reacts videos. One of the things that's really important to remember, if you're exercising a lot, and if that's part of your life, you're at the gym and all that, that's not where the clinical application of keto and carnivore came from. It started with people who were unable to exercise, fixing metabolic issues. And so that's a different context that you need to learn from people who've figured that out online. I think there are some good influencers online who've helped a lot of people. But again, the selection bias is a problem. So that perhaps your story or your result is some biologic factor, not just social, and maybe that's underrepresented in the internet, the highlight reel of, oh, look me, look at I did all this, and those who are not getting results don't say it publicly.
Dr. Westman, how does what we have learned now about the carnivore diet change how we think about nutritional science?
Well, that's a great question. And I've always been a critic of nutritional epidemiology, where you ask people what they eat periodically, sometimes once a year, and then you follow their health outcomes without any sort of experimental manipulation. And so I've always been critical of that, and I'm a clinical trialist. And so I value the Stanford paper with a couple hundred people on the diet, and they know they were following it, and I trust the prospective data more than the cohort studies. So my perspective is we have to get to biology. So I've started to teach, let's look at what the body's made of. Let's understand that we're mostly water, protein, and fat. In fact, there's no carbs stored on our body. I go over this with a body composition personally with my patients now. And I explain that we store fat on our body, not carbs.
Dr. Westman, people learn best from stories. And I know it's not science, but on the other hand, we we can begin to have some sense of your many decades of experience with first the Atkins diet, then the keto diet, now the carnivore-ish diet. You've had, probably hundreds of patients, perhaps now thousands of patients. Tell us about some that stand out in your mind where they came in perhaps overweight, perhaps with a diabetes problem, perhaps taking, as you said, many medications and not feeling well. Tell us about, without actually naming someone who could identify him or herself, how your approach has changed their lives.
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know where to begin. I mentioned the kind of garden variety reversal of diabetes, hypertension, obesity, PCOS, and GERD, and I would say those are papers that we have published. And so,
Now, Dr. Westman, I'm going to call you on the alphabets. You need to tell us what PCOS means. And a lot of people know what GERD means, but not everybody. So you'll have to explain that one too, please.
Sure. PCOS means polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disorder or heartburn. So these are things that either my colleagues who are internists can't fix or they give drugs for. So I think the extreme cases that I'm seeing now that I'm really kind of proud of because I stick to my guns. I'm a source where people can come and say, hey, I relapsed to sugar. And there are several patients who just, when they relapse to sugar, they can gain 20 pounds in 2 months. And they come back and they have the safe zone, almost like, I don't know, like getting in a church and having sanctuary, because we know now that sugar is as addictive as any other drug. It was regarded as a drug, and then in Gary Taubes' The Case Against Sugar book, he gives the history of that. So I think this woman who's stressful life and the sugar is just uncontrollable for that person. And that's kind of the new frontier of understanding that sugar is an addiction, and it's okay not to have it. But the medical side, if I put on my internist hat, it's the inflammatory bowel disease that goes away. It's my colleagues have super strong anti-inflammatory drugs now. They can give shots that cut out any symptom from inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. The problem is those shots are so good, you're at risk for having cancer because you need that anti-inflammatory response to fight cancers. And so these drugs are so strong, they're being used, and then most people don't think they need to change their diet. So I like people to understand that there's just another way to go about things. It's not wrong to take the drugs and eat carbs and all, but their lifestyle is so important and so powerful when it's done right.
So I'm going to ask you, in your mind, to imagine John Doe or Jane Doe, a patient, a real patient, who came in struggling, came in frustrated. Their diets haven't worked in the past. Their medications are only working so well. And tell us their stories.
Yeah, well, a doctor comes to mind who was weighing 350 pounds-ish. So it doesn't matter how tall you are. You're going to hit the high BMI obesity category. But he also had a really serious metabolic problem called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I'm seeing a lot more of that. And it actually, he was so skeptical. I mean, come on.
And what's it like to have POTS?
Well, POTS makes you uncomfortable when you stand. You might get tachycardia, a fast heartbeat, you get flushing, and then you can even pass out. So he was finding himself on the floor at home. His family would come find him.
And
so he's
at 350 pounds, they couldn't lift him up.
Yeah, well, that all goes without saying. The problems of the obesity too. I mean, so it's like obesity's kind of become, oh yeah, I can fix that, no problem. I just explain we have fat on our body. We need your body to burn fat. It's these other conditions. So that when he came back thinking or seeing the weight loss, that was one thing. But then when he starts saying, I'm not having those spells anymore. you are starting to understand the metabolic changes that are happening go beyond just the weight loss. And this could apply to any number of things. It's common today for people to be very skeptical. And then they come back sort of the tail between their legs. I didn't think this was going to work. One gentleman in his 70s, and he and his wife came back and they were like, wow, this really does work. Down, 20 pounds in the first visit duration since the first visit. And so that kind of change can happen fast. And the idea that you could change these medical issues just by changing the food is just not common knowledge. It's not commonly known. And food really is king.
Do we have any idea how a carnivore diet affects the gut microbiome?
Oh, it changes it, for sure.
I would imagine it would, because what you eat does change the microbes inside you. What's the impact?
I wrote a book with a super smart writer. That's my method, is I team up with other people for books. And we would go, not the microbiome again, because another study, another distraction. So, of course, the microbiome changes, and it changes in a favorable way. Best way I can explain it is like a scientist who showed me at a world-class meeting. He showed, click, here's a slide of this jungle, like the Amazon, and here's your microbiome. It's beautiful, the colors. And I'm like, well, there are things that can kill you there. It's the Amazon, little frogs. And then he goes, click, and here's the microbiome on a low-carb diet. And it was like a desert. And I'm thinking, man, Zen meditation and a resort area, this is really calm. That's what happens. Your microbiome calms down when you do of course it changes. And it's fascinating today. Well, we study carb eaters and look at their microbiome and say, well, if we can just have that bacteria and put that in another person who doesn't eat carbs, we're going to get all. No. So the best thing for your microbiome is to cut the carbs out.
I've got a question, Dr. Westman, about GERD. I remember a paper that you wrote that was, I would say, semi-heretical, because at that time, the H2 antagonist drugs were in the ascendancy, and then along came the proton pump inhibitors, which were going to be even so much better, and no more heartburn, no more GERD, we've got drugs. And you did a study, not a huge one, but it said a low-carb diet could change everything for people suffering from GERD, from bad heartburn, esophagitis. And then we started writing about it, and people started reporting, hey, you know what? It works. Even though conventional wisdom from the medicine community was, just give them a PPI.
Oh, and you should not be eating fat, obviously, if you have GERD, right?
Exactly.
Or caffeine or chocolate.
Or any of that stuff.
Yeah, so that's all the old stuff that doesn't really work.
So give us an update.
Well, looking back, the studies we did really are proof of concept studies, right? So they aren't big randomized trials looking at different types of diets. So many different diets could work. But this was an interesting study by a GI fellow at UNC. So we actually had a Duke UNC collaboration at the time. And he put a pH probe down the nose into the stomach of these people with refractory heartburn and looked just over a few days of changing the diet, the acidity changed. So you actually were changing the diet was like taking an antacid. So, so that was after the clinical signal is so strong. If I put someone on 20 grams, total grams, not net, of carbs a day, the heartburn goes away almost uniformly, 100%. But now time passes, so another study comes out where they gave 100 grams of carbs. The typical American may have 200 to 300 grams, and they cleaned up the food so it wasn't junky. 100 grams of carbs a day reduced the heartburn as well. So if we do a study that says 20 grams or less can fix, 10 people, it doesn't mean 50 grams can't or 100 grams can't. And so there's all this level of carbs that needs to be studied in my mind, or you just try it yourself if you the problem with that 100-gram fixing or reversing heartburn is it didn't work 100% like the 20-gram one did. So, that was a signal that, I cheated, and I read that in Dr. Atkins' book, Dr. Atkins' Health Revolution, because he had seen this in his clinical practice,
Well,
over.
you mentioned the science. Oh, we're always looking for the science because we hear, evidence-based medicine, randomized controlled trials. I searched high and low for data to support the traditional heartburn diet, which, as you say, it was no chocolate, no coffee, no fat,
No alcohol.
no alcohol. I mean, I looked for the data because this diet was given out by gastroenterologists all across the country for anybody who came in with heartburn. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, and I think we can understand why. The mechanisms have been key for so long. So there's caffeine loosens the lower esophageal sphincter. So does chocolate, and protein makes the glomerular filtration rate go up. Therefore, it must be bad. So if you only talk about mechanism, you can get into these strange rabbit holes. I really value whole human research where you're not just focusing on those little things.
Yeah, I think this is a really great transition into what I wanted to ask because science changes. And the carnivore diet kind of rose in popularity around COVID-19. This was a time when scientific mistrust started to grow in the public. And we saw that as COVID guidelines changed, people were like, wait, why is science so flip-floppy? And there's kind of a parallel here with the carnivore diet too. We've all been told plant-based, plant-forward. Now it's like, okay, meat forward. What do we do about this? And I think, you're telling us a little bit about how science changes, but what would you say to somebody who was trying to make the right choice, but maybe feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the scientific method?
Yeah, well, we do the best we can. And the basic biology, to me, rules. And nutrition epidemiology, even that's the red meat causes cancer thing. It's weak, observational. And to me, that's not something I use in my clinic. I don't value that. Red meat does not cause cancer to the level of certainty that I need to say, don't eat red meat. And I know I've been on panels with folks, and there are international organizations that are based on plant-based anti-red meat principles. I understand that. But the group at McMaster, whom I visited in the late 1980s, is evidence-based medicine for the world, basically. And they call out that this evidence about red meat and cancer is weak and it's not clinically relevant. So I don't worry about that. But getting back to the basic principle, don't eat a lot of junk food. Ultra-processed food today, unfortunately, suffers from this definitional thing. And processed food, people come to me saying, you mean I can't have bologna and can't have that? I said, no, you can have bologna, but that's processed. No, that's minimally processed. There's more nitrates in beets and broccoli than in these other, so it gets confusing, doesn't it? So you want to eat protein. We're made of protein. It doesn't matter to me if it comes from an animal or a plant. We're made of protein. Water is a given. You're going to have thirst. Then you can run your body on carbs or fat. It's your choice. You can, to sustain whatever kind of activity you're trying to do. So that opens the idea that you might do a keto or a carnivore diet because you're running on fat. And that's why we see people having such success with it. The body works just fine. If you don't like that way of eating and the social things today, but let's get real. Were we really designed to eat at a Thai food place and then a Mexican place and then all these great flavors? I don't think that's particularly a good thing, a healthy thing to do. It's very new, and you want to be honest about your ability to control things. If you're out of control with sugar, you avoid sugar. If you're out of control with bread, you avoid bread. So I think protein comes first. Instead of plant forward, I wish we would say protein forward.
Final words.
To summarize about a carnivore diet, I think it's a reasonable tool. And it may even be a healthy way to eat in the long run. There's a study that just came out, meaning in the last few years, where they looked at women who had been keto adapted for an average of 3 years, and all of the biochemical parameters they were able to check looked great. They fed them a UK-based diet with carbs, and everything went to hell in a handbasket. I know, a great scientific term. And then they went back on a keto diet, and everything looked great. And the average age was 32 years old. So what's unknown is this a long-term thing? But it might be.
Dr. Eric Westman, thank you so much for talking with us in the People's Pharmacy today.
My pleasure.
And thanks to you, Bianca Garcia, for helping us with the interview.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dr. Eric Westman, Associate Professor of Medicine at Duke University. He's a board member of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and the American Diabetes Society.
We had help today from Bianca Garcia, a medical anthropologist, foodie, and radio person. She served as a AAAS Mass Media Fellow covering health and science at WUNC, North Carolina Public Radio.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Denarius Thomas and Al Wadarski engineered. Dave Graydon edits our interviews. B.J. Liederman composed our theme music.
This show is a co-production of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC, with the People's Pharmacy.
Today's show is number 1444. You can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com. That's where you can share your comments about today's interview. You can also reach us through email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
Our interviews are available through your favorite podcast provider. This week, we're celebrating 10 million downloads.
That's cool.
Yes. You'll find the podcast on our website on Monday morning. In the podcast this week, Dr. Westman will discuss the impact of a low-carb diet on GERD. GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disease, and on the gut microbiome. What does Dr. Westman recommend for someone trying to make the right dietary choices but feeling overwhelmed?
At peoplespharmacy.com, you could sign up for our free online newsletter. That way you get the latest news about important health stories. When you subscribe, you also get regular access to information about our weekly podcast. We'd be grateful if you'd consider writing a review of the People's Pharmacy and posting it to the podcast platform you prefer.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next week. Thank you for listening to the People's Pharmacy Podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure to bring you our award-winning program week in and week out. But producing and distributing this show as a free podcast takes time and costs money.
If you like what we do and you'd like to help us continue to produce high-quality, independent healthcare journalism, please consider chipping in.
All you have to do is go to peoplespharmacy.com/donate.
Whether it's just one time or a monthly donation, you can be part of the team that makes this show possible. Thank you for your continued loyalty and support. We couldn't make our show without you.